And then that, to me, that does, like, I've had a couple of days where I've cried. I've had a couple of days where I've just been like, ugh, feeling like I don't want to admit the things that I'm working on to people because I feel like I should be doing better.
Combining that with something that I felt very important for myself in my journey is embracing self-compassion. And I can't say that enough, is holding that space of kindness. Take time to connect your heart and your mind. So as opposed to living from your head all the time.
I'm Coach Dez, mindset motivator and lifestyle entrepreneur. My mission is to help you crush your self-limiting beliefs and embrace being unapologetically you. The Born Unbreakable podcast brings you inspirational stories from all over the world that will empower you to unlock your unbreakable spirit. I'd love to partner with you on your next breakthrough. Go to bornunbreakable.com to schedule a free transformational call. Action begins today.
Welcome to the Born Unbreakable podcast. I'm your host, Coach Dez. We're officially in spring here in Las Vegas, Nevada. It actually feels like that. The sun is coming out. I think this weekend is the first time we'll hit the 90s in weather. And I know that's different everywhere. And my guest is tuning in today from Angus, which is a part of Ontario, Canada. I have Kristin Larsen with me today, who is an author and a transformational health coach. So we're going to get into some good conversation. How does spring feel over there,
So
Kristin?
Spring, it came early this year, and it was actually last week. It felt like summer. And now the temperature has changed drastically. And hopefully it's a nice transition into warmer weather.
That's nice. Yeah. I was telling Kristin before we hit record that I'm excited because I have my first trip to Canada to do some client work related to executive coaching, but I'm headed to Ottawa in May. So I think it will be nice. But I'm looking forward to more trips there and of course seeing other parts of Canada too. So I'll have to have you in my arsenal when I have questions about things in that direction. But this conversation I'm excited about because I just turned 40 recently this year in January, so a couple months ago, and I found myself in these deep pontification moments just related to my evolution, my health, my mental health. So both, I think, from a physical perspective of going, I feel like I have to be much more intentional. Like I can't just do whatever like 20 years ago when my body just like bounced back really quickly. But I think also from a mental health perspective, even though I've done a lot of what I would call healing work, like therapy, like being more vulnerable, trying to find more connection groups when I'm feeling down, I've recognized that feelings of like sorrow or sadness or depression, it still happens. Like even when you feel like you're trained or conditioned to manage it. And so I've got to think that there's many people at varying degrees of their experience with healing and doing healing work that might feel like me, where there's not this like place of epiphany where you are just perpetually peaceful. And then you just reach this point of omnipotence where, depression or anxiety can never be bestowed upon you ever once again. Because I think things like triggers are natural, when you see and experience things in the world. So, as I'm going through that reflection, I'd love for you to kind of keep that in mind, as we talk through just the cycle of, maybe sometimes pain and suffering that we go through in humanity. But before you answer all my questions selfishly, I'd love to start with, your story, because obviously you got to this place for a reason. what was the story that led you to where you are today doing the work you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for these wonderful topics and insights. I'm really appreciating them. I love going deeper into these things because this is what it's all about. This is life, and just being able to, I'm going to use this word probably quite a bit in this conversation, but just being present with the things that are happening, and just accepting those and acknowledging them as well. And I believe that's kind of where my story begins, navigating life as a child, and just feeling very confused about direction in life. What's my purpose? Why am I here? And it seems odd to say that at a young age, but that's where I believe my mental health journey started, was comparing and judging. And when I have kids, and they're teens right now, and I'm seeing patterns that I experienced when I was younger as a child, and it seems like those things they never go away. It's there. So it's an opportunity for me to help guide them through my own experience and my own journey. And as I said, it started with a lot of self-judgment that led to perfectionism, feeling that I needed to be perfect and lived up to these standards that they weren't really there. They were standards that I was creating, and that journey really followed me, or I allowed it to exist as I grew older, both in my teens, in my young adult age. And you mentioned that you just turned in your 40s here, and I'm nearing 50. I'm turning 46, and I'm contemplating a lot of things about mortality, aging, and not just myself, but just the things that are changing around me. And going back to my story, it was really looking at what I can let go of throughout that time, and the mental health aspect of being self-critical of myself, and the rumination parts. So life, how it was changing, and I felt like it wasn't changing in the way that I wanted it to. So that created more suffering for myself. And I didn't know how to navigate that. I didn't have the proper tools. And I was still developing emotional intelligence. I was still developing the different components that really help someone to work through difficult situations in life. And of course, that led me to feeling not worthy and not feeling enough as a person. And that really impacted my beliefs. And I know that we're going to touch on this, but I was really holding on to these beliefs that really limited me to how I was showing up in life, and to what I was, my perception of life as well. So I'm just going to pause here, and if you have any insights or comments, feel free.
You're speaking my language, Kristin. You're speaking my language. I can relate to everything you just said. I really can. I'm writing a book right now on overcoming your self-limiting beliefs. But the interesting thing that I keep coming back to, as much experience as I have to share, the cycle of what I think you can do to do that, I find myself following my own cycle constantly. So I'm a student perpetually. Like, I'm always a student of the things that I talk about, because that is the evidence, right? That I'm using. It's not like something that I've mastered and now I'm telling people you do this and I never experience it anymore. It's in fact because I experience it that I know that I have to go through this over and over again to recognize where I'm at, what I need to do, what I'm feeling. And so that's kind of the place that I'm, in right now, is like, I've talked about this before on my show as I engage with entrepreneurs, and I tend to be around, and I think that people who listen to this show are A-type personalities, meaning that they have intentions to do better, grow better, be better, look back 5 years from now and go, wow, this is awesome. Like, I am accomplished. But I'm in this period now where, again, I don't know if it's a milestone thing because you turn a certain age and you're like, did I do everything I wanted to do? I think it's a little bit of that, but it's all, I feel like, hitting me at once. So I'll give you some examples and then maybe you can give me some of your feedback, which is like, so, you know, I've always wanted to have an entrepreneurial spirit and, you know, find different ways to excel so I can have a life of service to do more and help more people. And so recently I went to this event in LA, and there were a lot of entrepreneurs who follow this person named Lewis Howes. You've probably heard of him, and he's just written a book on the greatness mindset. So I'm in this room, and you can tell that there is a range of people who are just starting out doing certain things, and then there's people who have had so many years of just like being in their expertise and touching so many lives. And I think when you're in that kind of environment, you go back to the enoughness. It's like, oh gosh, like, look at all these people, look at all the things they've accomplished. And so part of you feels inspired because you're like, wow, what an energy to feed off of. And then there's this other secret part of you that you don't want to reveal. That's like, oh my gosh, like, am I even capable? Like, should I have written this book like 5 years ago? Like, well, why, and then all these questions just start flooding you. And I think that, and then, so I'll give you one more example and then I'll let you jump in. Then I'm sitting here thinking about my health and I'm like, okay, I got to do something more drastic because I feel like I have lost my rhythm, my stride. The more vibrant version of me would be just nimble and quick and able to tackle anything from a fitness perspective. And then I sit here going like, oh, my routine is just not so great. It's kind of off. Like, this is not feeling good. So I recently signed up for this fitness challenge, which is phenomenal. It's like they give you the nutrition coaching, the fitness coaching. It's with kickboxing. So it's something new that I'm challenging myself with. I got like my protein shake while we're talking to each other, but it is like getting on training wheels again. I'm going back to something that I used to be phenomenal at. And now I'm kind of like a toddler again. And I'm, eating my veggies with the right proportion of proteins and no sugars and drinking nothing but water and having protein shakes. So, I'm down 2.8 pounds this week, which feels really good. But then I'm just like, how did I let myself get to this place where I feel like a toddler again in this area that I was like such a badass in before? So having said all of that, like, what do we do? Like, when we go through these cycles, to not question ourselves and to feel like we can have confidence because we're putting ourselves right back into this like questioning mode. And then that, to me, that does, like, I've had a couple of days where I've cried. I've had a couple of days where I've just been like, ugh, feeling like I don't want to admit the things that I'm working on to people because I feel like I should be doing better. For like as much knowledge as I have, I feel like I should be showing up better. So what would you say?
Well, yeah, that's definitely some wonderful things to unpack there. And first of all, I'm appreciating some of the key points that you said was that you're wanting to be in service and you're surrounding yourself with the people that are doing wonderful things and supporting other people. So I'm just celebrating that with you. And in regards to looking at other people and what they're doing, what they're accomplishing, or things like that, the word that comes to me is possibly, and not just referring to you, but someone else as well, is like the imposter syndrome. So seeing where I feel like I need to be doing more or I'm not doing enough, but yet going back to purpose and why you're doing what it is that you're doing. That's the generator of that inspiration. And it's wonderful to be around these people and have that inspiration. But I feel like inspiration comes from within and is that igniter of why someone is taking the actions that they're taking and just connecting with that. So when that comes up, it's just continually connecting with that and knowing with clarity why those actions are being taken, and combining that with something that I felt very important for myself and my journey is embracing self-compassion. And I can't say that enough, is holding that space of kindness for yourself and wherever you are, that starting point, and just knowing that you're continually taking the steps forward to get to where it is that you want to be. And with self-compassion, I believe also comes self-talk. So having awareness for that self-talk as well. Is that self-talk, is that encouraging? Is it motivating? And if it's not, looking at what is being said in those moments and taking the steps to shift that as well. So that's actually my answer or insight to both of those kind of scenarios that you shared. And the second one, I believe everything starts with habit. When we talk about mindset, it's accumulated habits, what we're doing in our day, or what we're choosing to reinforce that mindset that we want. So when we talk about the habit of health, and if we're talking about nutrition, if we're talking about exercise, what is allowing us to take the necessary actions that we want to be taking to make that consistent, to be dedicated and disciplined to those things? And are we doing them? So I believe it comes down to the simple things. It's all about the simple things that we're either doing or not doing, and going back to those. And when we're not doing them, what's taking us away from that? What are we making more important? So it's definitely, for me, it's sitting down and reflecting on those actions that I'm making my intentions towards. And I believe that's another thing, is looking at what the intentions are. And that starts at the beginning of your day.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more, because, what I realized, particularly in this health arena, was that my intentions weren't clear, right? They were just like, nah, whatever, it's fine, I'll get to that later. And it wasn't until I made this commitment to myself that my intentions became very clear. Like, there's a certain amount of weight to be lost. There's a routine to be changed, both with how I exercise and how I eat. And then the cake topper is the accountability, because every Sunday I'm taking pictures of my groceries. I'm taking pictures of my meals throughout the week. And I'm also taking pictures of like my scale and so there's this process of doing that with community, and then doing it with a coach, so that it's very clear what you did or didn't do, because you're tracking it the entire time. So like this past week, I was like jazzed up because I've been drinking a gallon of water every day. And if I don't do it with consciousness, like, because I'm not one of those people that just, it's supernatural for me. Like, I have to be like, if I don't start at least 6, 7 a.m., it's probably not going to happen, because there's just too much catch up to play if you wait until lunchtime before you start drinking water. So, but it's a habit. Like, you just either know that this is what you're doing, or you let it get past you, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to make my goal if I don't, start doing this by this time. So it's not hard. And I think what I've recognized in, with this as my leading example, because it's in front of me, is that it's how you plan and how much you're prioritizing something. Because when you prioritize it, there really are no excuses. So that's like what I'm experiencing, within this last week of me making this decision, is that it's very conscious if we give ourselves enough time to lend to how we really feel about whatever the thing is that we want to make progress on.
Yeah, there's a few things, and thank you for sharing those wonderful insights as well. A few of the things that you mentioned, definitely accountability. I feel that's so important when you're able to accept that and just embrace that. That shifts your whole mindset of how you're approaching things. And I really believe in inner leadership. So really honoring and respecting the journey of where you got to where you are, no matter where that is, where that starting point is. and just acknowledging your capabilities and knowing that there are no limitations. The limitations are only the ones that we decide to put in front of ourselves. And of course, to raise those limitations, that requires shifting some beliefs probably. And the other thing is the small steps. Changing a habit is all about incorporating those small steps, those little incremental percentage changes, which in the end is quite a bit. And just being patient with that. And this goes back to everything, is trusting the process when you're taking those actions.
Right. It's those 2 millimeter shifts. It's never like these big leaps. But I want to come back to a word that you said that really struck me. So we can talk about how to maybe practice it a little bit more, which is self-compassion. I feel like it's a natural for us to beat ourselves up. We said we were going to work out for an hour and I only have 30 minutes. So it's the best I could do, right? It's basically saying that here's this set of things and I accomplished a percentage of it. And so, when I read the book, The Gap and the Gain, it really helped me recognize what we tend to do, which we focus on what we don't do versus what we do. And therefore we're stuck in a gap instead of going like, oh my gosh, look, I did 70%, which is closer to the 100. It's better than 0. So I'm farther than, but like our minds don't tend to go there. We focus on that 30%. And so how can we practice that self-compassion and not wake up every day and then end our days with beating ourselves up for the things that we didn't get to accomplish?
That's a wonderful example. And at the beginning of this show here, you mentioned that people that might be listening to the show or watching the show are A-type personalities. And I feel like A-type personalities, because they're so driven and possibly goal-oriented, that's what the main focus is always on, that end result. And that makes it difficult when things aren't going according to plan, or things aren't going smoothly, or things aren't accomplished. With self-compassion, that really helps someone to acknowledge the steps that are being taken, and to also process and understand the emotions that are coming up as well. And when someone's not practicing self-compassion, they're basically, I found myself isolating myself, not being connected to other people, thinking that I'm all alone in what I'm experiencing. And when you're able to open yourself up to that, number one, there's relatability, and number two, there's a common connection. And of course, the other component of self-compassion is understanding what it is that you need, especially in that moment of struggle or suffering, and just being kind to yourself and asking yourself that. So what that practice for me looks like is when I wake up in the morning, I'll meditate, and then after that meditation, I have a little prayer that I do, which is a prayer of kindness. So I give myself what I want in that day. So the term that I use is that way of being. So if I want joy, if I want love, if I want excitement, whatever that is, I give that to myself. And I also tell myself that I'm doing a great job, and reinforce that I know I can do this. And also end it with telling myself that I love myself, that it may be difficult for people to do that or even say that to themselves. But when you do that, you're opening yourself up.
Wow. What a way to start the day. To give yourself that level of energy. And I do think that I picture the days of so many wonderful people that I know. And I think the reason it feels tough is because you start by giving all of that, everything you described, elsewhere, right? So you're just waking up and just kind of going out there into the world. But if you can start with you, then you're treating that honor and respect and love in the direction that is going to allow you to better position giving that energy, out to others with more intentionality. That's amazing. That's something that's so simple. I feel like everybody can do that. But it brings me to a book that you co-authored that has more of these kinds of insights in it. So tell me about the book and how the co-authoring of it came about.
Yeah, so the book that we're talking about right now, it's called The Decision to Heal: Pathways from Suffering to Love. And it was myself and 5 other authors. Some of these authors I had not met previously, and some of them, when I went through the coaching program that I took, I met them in that coaching program. And we just kind of collaborated on an idea to write a book together and share our stories of our struggles and suffering that we went through in our life, and most importantly, the decisions and choices we made to overcome those. And each story is different. Everyone has a different path or journey, but what's interesting is that you can relate to different parts of these stories. Just like even if someone has a different journey in their life, there's components to it that you can relate to. And a lot of it has to do with just really accepting yourself, embracing yourself, and going back to appreciating life and gratitude and being present in life as well. So as I've shared kind of my struggles in life and with mental health, depression, anxiety, that's really what has consisted of my story and the choices that I've made to navigate that.
Wow, that is so amazing. So it's like this awakening that you go through, but it's also in collaboration and community with other people who have similar experiences.
Correct, and I love that word that you just used. It is an awakening, and once you have that awakening, you don't want to be sleeping through life. You want to always be healing and growing and learning and ultimately transforming into that vision that you have for yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you said sleeping through life, I often think about how we sometimes go on autopilot, where you just do things because you've always done it, but you know that there's something inside that's missing. Like you don't feel 100% gratified or satisfied, but then you ignore it and just kind of keep chugging along until there's like a breaking point or a revelation or, something happens and you're just like, I'm tired of this. This is crazy. I can't keep doing this. And so I think my hope is that we don't let ourselves to get to the point of it being like a last straw moment or situation, that we can be attuned enough to hear the calling, more like you were saying, being present, because then there is that more proactiveness of, how many times have you heard a story of someone going like, I look back and I wish 5 years ago when this started to happen to me and I just ignored all the signs. And, the key is that you take action. So, but I do think there's a lot of the guessing and the questioning of oneself, where I think we don't realize the power of our instincts sometimes. Like they're there for a reason. The reason why we have like those gut instincts is because it's our internal mechanics telling us that there's something off, or there's something that could be better, or there's something that that your heart wants to pursue. But I do think that coming back to this place of purpose, like having that be a centerpiece, is oftentimes like the jumping point that allows somebody to make a decision with more decisiveness, because they're like, wait a minute, am I aligned with the purpose, and that is usually an indicator of what you should do next, I think. Right?
Yeah, and I feel like I feel like it's natural for everyone to be wanting happiness and fulfillment in life, and I also feel like it's very easy to be validating that externally as opposed to living. I love the word joy because joy comes from inside, and it's a creation that someone has a choice to manufacture that however they want. So in saying that, there's always that next accomplishment or that next thing that someone thinks that is going to bring them happiness or completeness or fulfillment. But it's almost like it's a never-ending search when you're in that mindset. And I just wanted to express that because when we're talking about career, when we're talking about family and different things like that, I think it's so important to make that differentiation.
Yeah. And I do have this feeling that we are constantly evolving. I believe that. I think that we're continuing to figure things out. I don't know that you ever have it all figured out. And so we know what's happening at the moment, but there's so many possibilities that we don't know, right? There's quite a bit. And so I think that giving ourselves the permission to be lifetime explorers, if you will, is okay. Because, I found that sometimes I don't know how I feel about something if I haven't studied it enough to have an opinion. It's like that, then all of a sudden you open yourself up to a different world and you realize what's there that you had skepticism about before. Like in the wellness space, that's how I felt about meditation. I was like, what, you're saying you're gonna be quiet? Like, why would you do that? And just like sit there with yourself? But you could be doing something. Like, why would you want to be? It's because I think like if you're not familiar, you think about it as, especially if you're like one of those busybodies, it's like, yeah, but you could be productive. You could be doing something. Why would you want to just sit there with your thoughts and your energy like that? But you don't actually realize that the process of meditation is to be centered and have more clarity so that when you do get to the things of like productivity, you're actually more focused. But if you've never meditated, then that's not how you might look at it. Right. So that's what I mean about exploration.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to elaborate on what the wonderful insights that you're sharing right now with meditation as well, it gives you the opportunity to detach from your thoughts. So not to be your thoughts, but to be an observer of your thoughts, which is definitely a big part of presence, and just to be present with yourself in that space, and just allow the thoughts that are occurring to float around, and knowing that you don't need to be in reaction to those thoughts as well.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good insight, because we're not our thoughts, but our thoughts can influence our actions and how we show up. So there's this connection that we make if we want to experience, well, and I think it goes back to some of the intention you just mentioned. So if you wake up and you tell yourself, I want more excitement, I want more joy, I want more peace, whatever that might be, which could be different every day. There's just something inside you that is asking for a different request from the universe. Then the alignment of your thoughts to then your actions can be more, that interconnectedness is now there. Whereas if you don't have intention, I mean, your day is probably just going to go all over.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I wanted to comment. Being a student, what comes to my mind is definitely curiosity. It's something that I've learned is so important to have because it changes your whole perspective on everything. You're open to seeing other perspectives, and what I find keeps me stuck is being in a fixed mindset. So not being open to the learning or the growth that's available, or even some other choices, because I'm stuck in thinking in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I've often thought about is like how we might fight our past, or our traumas because we don't want to lean into them. So what I mean by that is, let's say it's the stuff that you don't want to talk about, right? Like in a conversation with the world, you don't want it to be put out there that like poverty was something that you had to battle with, or violence in the household, alcoholism, things that feel so painful. So then you just push them down and you create almost a barrier because you just don't want to be that. And so you ignore it without openly, maybe not to every person, but maybe where it could be useful. What would you say to people who have something internally going on inside like that? Whatever it is that they're battling with. Those are just some examples. What would your advice be to people who are like, well, I don't want to be those things, therefore I suppress them, don't talk about them, because if I don't, then I could just be something else.
And I just want to acknowledge that everyone has their own levels of trauma, or how they process things, and I believe that when those types of things are pushed down, they always come out at some point in life, and I can attest to that. Going through my struggles, I didn't tell anyone about them, and I kept them hidden, and they surfaced at some point, and it really grabbed my attention to address them. And definitely the component of addressing them, that could be through, I found journaling to be very helpful to be able to release the thoughts, the emotions, and things like that. And that opened up the opportunity for me to feel, I don't want to use the word comfortable, but to be able to share those with other people. And when I'm able to start sharing these things, it is like a release. It is like it's like empowerment, because you don't feel like you're restricting yourself. You don't feel like you're stopping that voice from expressing yourself. And I believe that's definitely the starting point, to be able to somehow begin to release those in a way that someone feels in alignment with and comfortable with, whether that's like I said, journaling, or even just it might sound funny, but expressing these things to yourself and verbally expressing them until someone feels like they're ready to talk with someone that they can trust.
Yeah. I always wonder if we spend enough time with ourselves in that way, right? I think we spend time with ourselves occupying time with things. Like I could tell you how many Netflix series I've like funneled through in the last few weeks as a way to, relax or whatever. But I found that those moments where I'm really in thought, and when I do take that step to journal, because I'm like, gosh, this is really on my mind. Like, what am I doing with this? And it's almost finding a place for it so you can process it. And I know part of processing is in different ways. There's our thoughts. Then there's the audio, right? Like that's what you and I are doing right now. We're using our words, we're listening to each other. But there's that audio of listening to yourself. Like I know some people who do notes to themselves, or they'll say their thoughts out loud and record it so they can play it back. Whether it's because it's something they want to come back to, it's an idea that they have. So there's something in that action of hearing yourself, and then there's the act of reading it. So as you're writing something, having it visible in front of you, going like, oh, wow, this has been a recurring thought for the last week. It's on my mind every day, whatever that is, this relationship thing, this health thing, this money thing. And I think that happens because it's like this internal thing telling us that you have this thing you want to do something about, but you're just not sure where to go with it. Therefore, it's going to stay present until you get to this place of processing so you can determine what the action is of how you want to address that. So I think that's what's going on, and so it's just a matter of figuring out for yourself, what kind of person are you? Are you the writing or
and those are some great points. And I feel like what stops someone from taking that step obviously is the fear of what's going to happen when this is opened up, or when whatever is occurring, what's released from this. And as human beings, when we've been in a certain space for so long in regards to what we're experiencing, we become comfortable. We become comfortable in that space, and it becomes difficult to step outside of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kristin, talk to me about your programs. Like what do people come to you for? What is it that you find yourself doing every day to help people?
Yeah, so a lot of things that we're discussing, it's the first program I have, it's called Leading from Within, and it's really helping someone to access their inner leadership, to embrace ways of being that are in alignment with what they want. And of course that incorporates the self-compassion component, the presence component, looking at joy as well. So living from a place of joy and coming from that place, and then just helping someone develop those awarenesses for the things that are stopping them from being in that place. And that looks like it's different for each person, because we all have our own stories and our own obstacles that we're moving past. But it incorporates a lot of mindset, a lot of habit change, and of course, the empowered action. So living in integrity, which I think is a huge thing when we're living in our life and the actions that we're taking. And actually, I have one other program, which is really helping someone to. It's more like a 6-week program, so it's helping someone to navigate and process and understand their emotions, and look at how that's affecting how they're showing up in their life, and kind of gaining insight on what they would like to be moving towards instead.
What comes to mind when I hear you talk about these amazing things that you do is self-awareness. I mean, I think that the process of someone tapping into really understanding who they are, maybe where their thoughts come from, so that they can make those more bold steps to this vision of themselves that they have, is such a critical experience, for us to live into the best version of how we want to be and how we want to engage, with the world around us. So that's so powerful. And how would people sign up for any of those
So
kinds of programs?
I like to have a conversation with someone just to get to know where they're at, what they want. And usually that first conversation, I can be reached. I have a website that someone can reach me at to connect with me, and just go from there. Schedule a conversation with me. That's basically what I'm saying.
Awesome. Cool. We'll make sure we'll put the link to your website into the show notes. But I want to get into some questions just to get your perspective. I think part of what I love about these conversations is just hearing, personal insights into things that I think will help people have reflections of their own. And the first question that I have for you is around success principles. So when you think about, which I'm sure there's many things you could think of throughout your whole life, if you had to boil it down to one thing that you felt has been this consistent pillar, tidbit of information, what success principle would you say that you've lived by, that you have found be such a pervasive part of where you've gotten to today?
That is a wonderful question. There's probably many different things that I could respond to that with, but I feel for me to be able to show up in the way that I want, it's being curious and challenging my thoughts. And what I mean by that is when I feel that I'm hiding or I'm not showing up in the way that I want, to challenge those thoughts, those limitations, those beliefs that I'm holding in that moment to be true, and just being curious about that. And of course, when I invite that self-compassion component in there, it allows me to explore deeper and to kind of let go of that ego that's keeping me in that spot. And it just helps me to navigate that, and for me, it's just empowering, and it's powerful. It sounds so simple, but I believe that a lot of people don't do that because of many different fears that come up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Curiosity, I think it is how we absolutely grow. What about a self-limiting belief? What's a self-limiting belief that you have had to overcome?
I have a few of them. One of them is that I don't know enough, or that I'm not good enough to do this, or what else? I'm not, and then of course those piggyback on I'm not worthy to have that because I don't know enough, because I need to know more.
Ugh, gosh, that plagues us, doesn't it?
Yeah, and especially when you're continually evolving and you're trying new things or doing different things. Of course, there's going to be a learning progression or sequence to that, and we're not a master overnight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we are sitting here, almost going into May, right? So we've got a good runway left of 2023. If there was one goal that you wanted to accomplish by the end of this year, what is that? What would it be?
Well, I'm about to publish another book, so I can't include that one because I know that's happening. It would be to create audiobook versions of the books that I've published already. And as well, I have a vision of creating an online dropshipping store, which has to do with mental health and ways that it can support other people in their lives, incorporating my different creativities and different works as well.
Oh, I love that. Well, I know we've spent a little time in this episode talking about, mental health and some of the practices. And I'm sure there's others that you might talk about in your book, but you talked about the morning routine of meditation and kind of this affirmative conversation you have with yourself. If there was one other tip that you would want to give to anyone that is working on their mental wellness routine, what's a tip that you might give?
Definitely gratitude. I feel like that should be in everyone's daily routine, but that's fairly common. So I would say a check-in. So like a midday check-in, just to see where you're at mentally, emotionally. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't do. And because that allows you to pause and to be able to shift into another operating state. And in that is also breathing. That. So when you're doing that check-in is to see how your breathing is, because when we're in a stress state, obviously that shifts our breathing, and we're able to kind of realign our breathing, then it opens up our choices and opportunities as well, because we have a different perspective on things.
Yeah, I think we underestimate the power of breathing, honestly. I hosted an event yesterday, and part of it was a sound bath, which I had never participated in previously. I've heard of it, but much of it is about the breathing, deep breathing that you do in and out. And then there's a facilitated guide that's kind of taking you visually to, somewhere else, which is very, very cool. It does actually make you feel like you're going on a little journey. And then you come back and you're like, whoa, that was cool. That's pretty neat kind of form of meditation. But yeah. People will have to look that up if you haven't experienced a sound bath before. But Kristin, as we close, one question I have for you is, if there was a last piece of advice that you would give to anyone listening, what would that be?
It would be to take time to connect your heart and your mind. So as opposed to living from your head all the time, to make sure that you're taking time to connect your heart in there as well.
That's so good. That's so beautiful. Kristin, how can people reach you? What's the best way to connect
so I have a website, and if it's in the show notes, great. But it's KristinSvenLarsen.com. And it has access to both learning about myself, my books, and also how I support people in coaching.
Amazing. Well, you certainly helped me today. I feel like I have a calmer energy. I feel like going into this interview, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to work on this, I'm working on that, and I don't know. No, I'm like, I have gratitude for myself. So it is. I do think it's amazing how it's very these small mindset tweaks that can allow us to have joy, even in our progress. Because sometimes I wonder if we don't give ourselves permission to celebrate until something is done, versus celebrating through each of the progressions, or even just revelations, that we have as we go through something. I think sometimes we keep that finish line so far that it's almost like you're not allowing yourself to embrace the now.
Yeah, absolutely. Acknowledging all the steps along the way, because they are celebrations. They're part of the journey, and if they're not acknowledged, then all you have is the end result, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today and being patient as we are figuring out how to get our technology coordinated.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful conversation. I really appreciate this.
episode 153 with Kristin Larsen, Transformational Health Coach. Gosh, you could tell his level of connection and listening is so well-conditioned. He is someone who has mastered the art of being present, and I certainly appreciate it. I think I needed it. Maybe a little bit of like a therapy session for me personally, and hopefully it benefited you. I think that, I'm working on being in a more vulnerable place, and just more honest with myself and the things that I want to do and the things that I want to work on. And I am in a season where, I had done an episode in the past that was talking about our seasons change and what we focus on therefore changes, right? And I've been in seasons where relationships were my focus or finance was my focus. And I'm in a season where health is my focus. And, so it is more conscious energy that's going to my nutrition, my exercise, my mental health and well-being, my sleep, like things that I tend to put to the side. After the interview, Kristin and I were talking about one thing that we wish we would have highlighted. So I want to highlight that in this reflection, which is around taking time to process. It's important that we take time to process our thoughts, our feelings, where we're at, and giving ourselves the permission to change directions if we want to. As human beings, we have this beautiful gift of resiliency and building up that resiliency based on our experiences. And when we learn to become more present, like Kristin was talking about, then we can work on that ability to pivot and shift, change directions, redirect our attention. And I think with maturity, you realize that there's probably more times than not that it's important for us to do those things. If you are listening and you're an A-type personality, it is oftentimes an agenda that you want to follow. And I'm here to tell you it's okay if you deviate from that agenda, if you find that you need to. So hopefully this episode has given you some good insights, some things to reflect on. I will drop in the show notes where you can reach and connect with Kristin. If he spoke to you, I know he certainly spoke to me in a very meaningful way. And remember that you are your only limit, so take action. And I say that with a little bit of emotion today because I'm in a place where I'm living that. I know that I'm my only limit, and I know that the actions that I'm taking are a direct product of making intentional decisions, and I want that same for you. I want you to be in a place where you are making decisions that you feel good about, that you feel proud of, and that you feel are going to take you in the direction of exactly where and exactly who you want to be. So thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Born Unbreakable. It means everything to me. You're 153 episodes in, or maybe this is the first episode that you've ever listened to this show. And either way, I appreciate you being here. So stay tuned. There is a lot more in store. And if there's episodes that you still need to catch up on because you're not listening in order, which you don't have to, that's the beauty of this show, go take a look at some of those other topics and other amazing guests that I've had on my show. And if you want to be a guest, I haven't put that out there in a while. I do get a ton of requests, so don't be alarmed. If I don't get back to you right away, but if you have a compelling story, if you know someone who has a compelling story, please reach out. It would mean a lot. Rate and review the show if you haven't already, and I will see you next time on the next episode of the Born Unbreakable podcast. See ya.